Welcome to the Georgetown University Library. My name is John Buchtel. Thank you for coming. I am director of the Booth Family Center for Special Collections up here on the 5th floor of Lawinger Library. And I'm very pleased to welcome you today for this event. I hope you can stay for lunch after the talks. And then I hope you can also make it over to the performance in McNair Hall, which is going to be a wonderful, wonderful performance. They always bring in first-rate performers. The collections of the Booth Family Center for Special Collections include rich holdings relating to the history of African American contributions to the arts, notably in the Catherine Biddle papers and in the Leon Robin Endowment Fund collection, among others. Collections such as these provide opportunities for class visits and student research so that Georgetown students can gain a tangible experience of history working directly with primary sources. The richness of our special collections enables us to collaborate closely with faculty across the university, and we're especially delighted to be able to support the First Friday Music Concert each fall. The extraordinarily generous and far-sighted endowment created by our late alumnus, Leon Robin, allows us to add to these collections, as well as to display and promote collections, including the Lost Archive of Margaret Bonds, which we're very pleased to introduce to you today. A little background on this collection, how it came here. In April 2013, when I arrived at the Park Avenue Armory in Manhattan, for my annual trip to the New York Antiquarian Book Fair, I made a beeline for the booth of one of my favorite antiquarian music specialists. He told me offhandedly that he had just acquired an interesting archive consisting of original musical scores, handwritten notes and correspondence, printed ephemera, and related material from the personal papers of Margaret Bonds. He told me who she was. I confess I didn't know at that point. He hadn't even had a chance to catalog the material yet, but I immediately put a hold on the collection, knowing of the keen interest back home here at Georgetown in material of this nature. Thanks to Mr. Robin's generous endowment fund, we were able to acquire that collection. The following year, the same dealer contacted me again. His source had a second batch of materials from the Margaret Bonds papers. Believing strongly, as I do, in keeping archives of related materials together, whenever possible, I was glad that we were able to act on that offer as well. Then I did a little poking around on the internet, and I found that a different dealer was listing materials by Margaret Bonds as well. This was someone I didn't know, and his prices were exorbitantly high. So I enlisted the aid of a third dealer, someone that I knew and trusted, an expert, who helped me negotiate a fair price, not once, not twice, but on 3 separate occasions, to enable Georgetown to gather different parts of the Margaret Bonds archive back together. Finally, this spring, I got to meet that mystery dealer, a Lower Manhattan book scout, who had gone in with a partner to acquire the Margaret Bonds papers from a storage locker sale in Brooklyn. He told me the story of finding a few books from her collection while rummaging through a sales warehouse and asking if there was any archival material among the things that they had. He was told no several times. Thankfully, he was persistent. He kept rummaging until he discovered stacks of archival materials by Margaret Bonds sitting next to the trash. This collection came inches from the dumpster. It is humbling to have played a part in ensuring the preservation of this collection and gathering it back together into one place after it was nearly dispersed piecemeal. The collection is now cataloged and available to students and researchers here in the Special Collections Reading Room in the 5th floor. Anyone can come in and use this collection. After this morning's talk, please be sure to take a copy of the exhibition catalog to have a look at the exhibition itself. Please note that part of the exhibition is inside the glassed-in reception lobby of Special Collections. Don't be shy. Please go in. Please take a look. But we do ask that you leave food and drink outside of the glassed-in area. And now, I'm pleased to welcome the exhibition's curator, Professor Anna Celenza of the Department of Performing Arts, to welcome our guest speaker. And there are many other people to thank. I'm not going to list names, but Georgetown's staff, library staff, and performing arts staff have done a wonderful job in putting this event together today. So, welcome, Professor Celenza.
Thank you. As a faculty member here at Georgetown, it is a great pleasure to have such a fabulous librarian with Special Collections to keep an eye out for of these things. And about every 2 weeks we get an email. I found this, are you interested? Are you interested? And so thanks to Mr. Robbins' endowment, we do have funds, then we're able to grow the collection. And another great pleasure in working on this project this summer was one of my best friends from undergraduate, Kristen Meyers, who's now a musicologist. She was here over this summer, early summer, and we were talking about what we were working on, our projects, and I told her that I was working on this, and she said, oh, I have a great friend, and she's writing a book, and I think a chapter is on Margaret Bonds. I should put you two together. And so Kristen emailed Tammy Kernodle and me, and we started meeting over the internet on email. And then I was like, you should come see what we have. And you should give a talk when we all out, because you really know a lot of things. And so she came this summer, we got to know each other, and now I feel like I've known her forever, and I'm just blown away by her knowledge and her talent and her open-heartedness to all these things. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Professor Tammy Kernodle from the University of Miami, Ohio. She is a full professor, a well-known scholar, and what I think is most important is the fact that she is able to go from one genre to the next, as opposed to just looking at jazz, or just looking at popular music, or just looking at classical music, a sense of what is the full picture that we have of American music. So please help me in welcoming Professor Tammy Kernodle.
Before I start, I definitely want to thank Dr. Celenza. I feel like, as she said, I've known her forever. Last night we spent a great deal of time talking. It's great to have someone who you can express your ideas and your aspirations to, and they express theirs, and you feel a kinship, and they inspire you and make you stay up to 1 o'clock in the morning. Because you're so inspired, you can't go to sleep, you keep writing. I also want to thank you for your diligence in getting this collection. I did not know the part about the story where this collection was almost lost, and so this is a great moment, not just in the history of Georgetown, which I have no doubts people will come to Georgetown, but this is a great moment in American music history. As I have no doubt that Margaret Bonds will move from being an enigmatic figure for most people to a well-known composer and progressive voice. So thank you so much. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am American. The same month that Rosa Parks was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama, for refusing to give up her seat on the city bus, composer Margaret Bonds set these words to music. They are drawn from a Langston Hughes poem written in 1932. the song would become part of a song cycle, famously known as the Dream Variations, one of Bonds' most well-known works. These words not only reflected what was happening in Black America as the civil rights movement as we know it was commencing, but it also reflected a political and racial consciousness within the composer that reflected her upbringing in Chicago at the height of the New Negro movement, but also her awareness and ultimate rejection of this mythology of Black exceptionalism. You see, in the year that Langston Hughes wrote this poem, 1932, Margaret Allison Bond was coming into her own. She was entering her third year, studying piano and composition at Northwestern University. And that same year, her song, Sea of Ghost, won first place in the song category of the Wanamaker Prize. Her mentor and teacher, Florence Price, who resided in her home, also won the Wanamaker Prize that year for her symphony in E minor. Would go on to be the first symphonic work by an African-American female composer to be performed by a major orchestra. But despite these success, Bonds also was entering a period of great emotional and social change. You see, Northwestern, although it admitted a small number of African American students, had no accommodations for them. And so daily, Margaret Bonds had to endure a very complex and very long commute to Northwestern. This insult was even furthered when it became clear that she and that small group of African American students could not use certain facilities on that campus. And so in those experiences, this notion of Black exceptionalism, that one's talent and their ability to master what was seen as European norms or the touchstones of the dominant culture would eliminate these racial barriers. That all of that for her came to an end. You see, because much of Margaret Bonds' life had been centered or framed in this notion of Black exceptionalism. She grew up in Chicago, and her home became the center of the New Negro movement, what we refer to as the Harlem Renaissance, but in Chicago they had their own Renaissance. And so weekly, as a young child, she was exposed to intellectual and cultural exchanges held by composers like William Dawson and Will Marion Cook. She sat and listened as concert artists like Lillian Ivanti talked about her travels in Europe and sang art songs. And so it was out of this environment that Bonds developed not only exceptional talent, but this notion that race and gender would not be barriers to the concert stage. But at Northwestern, it became clear to her that no matter how exceptional she was, and she was exceptional, because she graduated from Northwestern at the age of 21, which means she entered at the age of 16. And by the age of 21, she had not only earned a bachelor's in composition and piano, but also a master's degree. So we're talking about exceptional talent. But she knew, despite all of that, that race and gender would always determine how she was heard and how she was seen. So she found solace and a new sense of identity in the words of Langston Hughes. Her identity would be reformed and recrafted, not in the mythology of Black exceptionalism, but in a Black radical identity that would be described as follows. We younger Negro artists who create now intend to express our individual dark-skinned selves without fear or shame. If white people are pleased, we are glad. If they are not, it does not matter. We know we are beautiful and ugly too. The tom-tom cries and the tom-tom laughs. If colored people are pleased, we are glad. If they are not, their displeasure does not matter. We build our temples for tomorrow, strong as we know how, and we stand on top of the mountain, free within ourselves. Those words, written by Langston Hughes in a famous article called The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain from 1926, came to frame the mindset and the art that Margaret Bonds would produce over the latter part of her life. And so in many ways, what Margaret Bonds represented as she became more and more of a relevant compositional voice in America in the years following World War II was that she was creating what we could define as a Black radical cultural expression. A shared vision with Langston Hughes, who, by the way, she met in 1936. And the two of them would have a very long and colorful, you get to read some of these letters, personal and collaborative relationship. They found kindred spirits. And I think that of all the people that Langston Hughes ever collaborated with, and believe me, I know the good, the bad, and the ugly, especially as it relates to William Grant Steele and the writing of Troubled Island, that Margaret Bonds became the only composer, Black composer, whose music could meet and match the emotion, the radicalness of Hughes's poetry. And so, when I state to you that Margaret Bonds was essential to helping establish Hughes as the poetic voice of post-war Black composers, I am not overstating that. Her Dream Variations, the art song, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, the cantata, The Ballad of the Brown King, which you will hear today, all of them are representative of how Margaret Bonds interpreted and found herself in the writings of Langston Hughes. But they also shared a common collective understanding of what Black art needed to be. Understand, both of them were reared, all both of them came of age at the height of the New Negro movement. And so both of them understood or reflected that notion of Black art and Black exceptionalism, but they also refracted the elitism of the New Negro movement. Hughes and his adaptation of the vernacular of the Black community. Bonds in her adaptation of the nuances of the Black church, the syncopated rhythms, the complex harmonies of the jazz club. All of these things coming together in a confluence of what Paul Robeson and others would call radical Black cultural expression. And while we know Margaret Bonds to be this significant composer and pianist, there is another side of her that is oftentimes not evident. Margaret Bonds, the activist. On one hand, we can say that her music served as a point of activism, but her work in the community, especially through a number of educational organizations, started by her and supported by her, like the Inner City Cultural Center in LA that she worked for in the last years of her life, or the Harlem Cultural Center that she was a part of creating in the late 50s and 60s, all in mind of cultivating the next generation of artistic voices. So the question is today, who is Margaret Bonds? Well, we know her to be a composer. We know her to be this concert performer. I think the world will come to know her as an activist and an educator. But most of all, I believe that Margaret Bonds, through her work, provides us a lens to understand the evolving racial consciousness of African Americans in mid-century Cold War era America. And she provided a means of expressing those experiences in the concert hall that have had a profound and enduring legacy. Thank
you. So what I'm going to do is, that was incredibly inspiring. I'm going to go through a few of the elements that I don't want you to miss while you're going through the exhibit. And to highlight, especially the last part that Professor Kernodle brought up, there are two exhibits, and the one that's inside the glass room is Margaret Bonds as artist and activist. So there are things she did that went beyond her relationship with Langston Hughes. I do urge you to go in there, and you will see reflected just by the multitude of things packed into those cases. There's so much she did, and it was so hard to figure out what to keep, in that, or things you didn't want to leave out. So as you go through and you read these letters, as you go through and you look at these pieces, you will see this is a life that was very full. And before I get started, I just want to bring up one other thing that's been very inspiring. As you read the letters, as you discover the relationship between Langston Hughes and Margaret Bonds and all these other artists that she had connections with, you realize how important community is. And you realize how important it is from one generation to pass on ideas to the next, and how much artifacts and things like collections like this can be inspirational. And as I look out into the room, I see one of my students in the back, Christina Piazza. And she's a composition student, and when this collection first arrived, you spent many an hour looking at it before it was even cataloged to study those scores and understand what's going on. So this really is a meaningful thing for the university. And in some ways, I'm hoping that Margaret Bonds' legacy can continue, if for no other way, through these artifacts that can inspire and bring people to another level. Could we have the lights down? Thanks. So Professor Kernodle mentioned this discovery of Margaret Bonds sort of discovering Langston Hughes. When she was a student at Northwestern University, it was a very tough time for her. And in later years, she was asked, do you remember when you first met or became aware of Langston Hughes? And this is what she said. I was in this prejudiced university, this terribly prejudiced place. I was looking in the basement of the Evanston Public Library where they had the poetry. I came in contact with this wonderful poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. And I'm sure it helped my feelings of security, because in that poem, he tells how great the black man is. And if I had any misgivings, which I would have had if you being here in a setup where the restaurants won't serve you and you're going to college, you're sacrificing trying to get through school, and I know that that poem helped save me. So her first encounter is an artistic encounter. She then sets the poem to music later on. This is a later setting. What's interesting is both Langston Hughes and Margaret Bonds were very committed to, you can tell in their letters back and forth, to these pieces that they've created together. And they do a lot to promote them. So trying to get these pieces performed anytime they can. And there are many settings. So there's one for solo voice, there's one for soprano, alto, tenor, bass, there's one for men's glee club, there's one. And it was, if anyone was willing to sing it, she'd make it work for who was there to sing it. And the reason I have this one up is Etta Moten was the first woman to perform this piece or to premiere it. And what's interesting is this wasn't who Margaret Bonds had in mind. She was thinking, if I'm correct, of Marian Anderson when she wrote the song. And Marian Anderson said, it's a little too jazzy for me, and decided not to sing it. Etta Moten is an incredibly important figure. She is the one that Gershwin had in mind when he wrote Bess, Porgy and Bess. So it was a very meaningful thing. I have this early image, you brought that up about her performance. We have this photograph, we don't have it. This is one that the Library of Congress has of Bonds performing Florence Price's piano concerto with the Women's Symphony Orchestra in Chicago. This was in 1934. So her career, as you said, sort of takes off in 32, and she's her early career is very much as a pianist. Her mother was a very well-known musician, very much pushed her to be a concert pianist. So to have that life of a performer versus a composer. And as she is doing that, okay, come on, next one. As she is doing that, she meets Langston Hughes in 1936. They are friends. She was preparing a concert in 1939, and she must have told Langston that she was very nervous. And this just gives you a sense of their friendship. He sends her a telegram. He's hundreds of miles away. Miss Margaret, Care Curtis Hall, this is so she was rehearsing in Chicago. I can hear you playing way over here, and it sounds good. Keep going, keep going. And there are lots of postcards in this collection, and so many that we weren't able to put in the display, and letters, and you get just a sense of their friendship. And so definitely don't overlook those. Another thing that doesn't get talked about too much is that Langston Hughes actually introduced Margaret Bonds to her future husband. Larry Richardson, Larry Richardson and Langston Bonds were friends in college. They both went to Lincoln University. He was living in New York. He was a parole officer in New York. Margaret Bonds married him. And right before she got married, she wrote 2 songs for him, the texts and the music. One is called Bound. It's more well-known. She also wrote one, If You're Not There. So they're trying to express in music and words to her fiance just how important he was. Now what's interesting is this is the sheet we have in the collection. If you turn it over, you can actually see some of her earlier notes. I know they're a little bit hard to see here, but with Bound, she was trying to look for metaphors to talk about how she was connected with him now. And what's fascinating by this is some of her earliest ones, the metaphor was slavery. Your slave in chains. No, your slave enraptured. You see her scratch it out and redo it. So glad you've captured me. And bound. And so these are various ones where she's working through it. And clearly she goes, that's not the metaphor I'm going to go for. And then we get, as the roots of the trees in the ground, I'm bound. As the earth with the sunlight is gowned, I'm bound. So she takes on the metaphor of nature. But what's telling in this, and this is something that I think you brought up as well, which is important, is there was this issue of, well, now that if I'm married, what's that going to do to me as a performer? What about my artistic life? Is there this other life I'm supposed to have? She and her husband had 1 daughter, Jane, and she kept traveling even after she really didn't let her career stop. And I think as you read the letters, not only between Langston Hughes and Margaret Bonds, but Margaret Bonds was also very close friends with a woman named Charlotte Holloman. Very fine opera singer, taught at Howard University. She just died last year. And there is, which is not in this collection, but if people want to come back, there's a story there. There are dozens of letters from Charlotte Holloman. And a lot of it has to do with that, not just the prejudice one might face as an African American, but also the gender. And a lot of times you see Margaret Bonds pushing and fighting against, feeling as though she's not being taken seriously because she's a woman. So she continues with her career. Definitely check out the Town Hall concert, was very important to her in 1952. She moves to New York in 1939. So in these exhibits, you can sort of trace her friendship becomes ever closer with Langston Hughes when she moves to New York. And when she had, which was this concert, which was a huge point in her career as a performer in 1952, she saved 2 of the telegrams she got. One is from Abby Mitchell, who is an African-American composer she met as a young woman. Abby Mitchell came to her mother's house often when her mother would have these salon concerts. And Abby Mitchell, in some ways, was one of Margaret Bonds' first teachers. And so she has that one, wishing you a great artistic success tonight, my love, and thanks for remembering me. And then the other one she saved was from Langston. I wish I were there, but since I am not, I am wishing you all the best tonight. And for me, what's telling about this is sometimes what she preserved and what she didn't. So when you go through this collection, these are things she carried with her for decades. So when she died in '72, a lot of these things were with her in Los Angeles. And so the people she preserves, the things she preserves to hold on to those people that were important to her, it's telling to me that these were the only 2 telegrams that we have from that concert. And another example of Langston kind of keeping her in a good mood. This is probably from about 1960, a Valentine that he sent, from one who can't carry a tune to one who makes marvelous music, Margaret Langston. So there's a real warmth and friendship that you find back and forth between them. And that grew out of not only Margaret Bonds setting Langston Hughes' text, but also the fact that Margaret Bonds was a fabulous entrepreneur and really a promoter of other artists. She created these concerts to really promote African-American poetry, African-American performers, African-American music, to sort of give it not only a history of the music, but even more important, to promote what is happening now and what is moving forward in the future. So this is one of many examples in the collection. You'll see this is a flyer actually promoting the work of Langston Hughes, Margaret Bonds, and Gregory Sims. And also in the collection you'll find a lot of times in notebooks where she's sketching out basically the copy for these sorts of things. So she did everything. She booked the hall, she booked the musicians, she wrote the copy, she got the printing done for the posters. She was sort of a one-man band in that way, and had a huge impact, especially after World War II, on African American culture in art beyond popular music. Another important part of this collection, as you go through, just highlights things to look for that might pass your eye. That we have a number of books from Langston Hughes signed to Margaret Bonds, and in fact, what was interesting is that was one of the last bits of the collection we got. As I was going through it early, and I had actually asked one of the librarians, I said, by chance, do we have any first edition Langston Hughes? It'd be nice to put some of these books, in the collection. And John said, actually, I just found out there are 3 that are for sale, and so let's get them. And so one of them, but this was one of those wow moments. So one of them, and you'll see it in the collection, is Fields of Wonder. This is a book of lyric poetry. And when we got the book, yes, you'll see it's signed to Margaret Bonds and her husband Larry. But when I started to page through it, I noticed that Margaret had gone and made little annotations on some of them. So numberings, and then G, C, no D. So she's putting in keys. She's thinking, she's reading the poems and instantly reacting. Like, I hear this in the key of G, I hear this in the key of D or C. And as I went through, I realized that one of the poems in this book that she had marked, which was going to be #1 in the song set, and she's like already copied, we, in her notebooks, had the song that came from it, Heaven, in manuscript. So, by getting these things together, you actually see her thought processes as she reads the book, her first instincts of key, and then the sketches as she's working out, setting it to music. And that's an amazing discovery of how does a composer work? How is she inspired? And as you go through the books that Langston Hughes sent her, you can see the ones that sparked her inspiration, and then the ones that have no markings on them. So it's interesting to kind of see that relationship as we go through. Another wonderful thing about this collection is we discovered works by Margaret Bonds we didn't know existed. So this is one probably from earlier in her career. It's called 3 Miniature Portraits of Uncle Joe. You will hear it on the concert today. As far as we know, this will be the first time it's been performed at a public concert. It's three miniatures for piano, and it's Uncle Joe. She did not have an Uncle Joe. I mean, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out Uncle Joe. I was realizing there is no. But Uncle Joe is a character that shows up in some of Langston Hughes' simple tales. So he's a character. And in fact, in African American literature, many people might know this, but for me this was a new thing. Uncle Joe is a stereotype of a trickster. He is someone who is very clever and is able to trick the white man to do what he wants. So it's a character, a type of characterization that goes all the way back to Commedia dell'arte. You've got the trickster who can go in and manipulate someone and make things work the way he wants. So that is the character, I'm guessing, of Uncle Joe. It just seems to make sense that she's kind of bringing that to life. And what's interesting about this is you also get the age of man. Age 17, then we have middle age, then we have old age. So it's interesting to see her kind of take a literary trope or a character and work it through purely musically. Another song that we have is Note on Commercial Theater. This is a poem that Langston Hughes wrote in 1940, and in this notebook, which must be from about 1960 because this song must be from about 1960 because all the other sketches in it trace back to pieces that she wrote in 60 and 61. We get the first full sketch. In fact, up to this point, many thought either this song was never written or wasn't completed or that it didn't exist. So this is the Langston Hughes Margaret Bonds premiere of Note on Commercial Theater, a tune that they worked on together, and they talk about in their letters, which is fascinating. So now we have this piece. Again, this will be performed today for the first time. And as you go through, you can see this collaboration is important. This is just a collection to sort of show you how you can kind of have these little stories as you go through the collection. This is a card, a ticket for a tribute to Langston Hughes. This is a concert that Margaret Bonds put together to celebrate him in 1958. We see the program of it here. We see a thank you card from him, a little postcard saying, wow, I'm at Fisk, I'm coming, I'm starting to head home, I'm at Fisk today, I'll be in New York, can't wait for this concert, this is amazing. And then the concert happens and we get his thank you letter. So as you go through, when you'll see these little collections, try to trace them through chronologically and you really get the story of various scenes in their lives, and it just brings that friendship together. As Professor Kernodle said, one of their most famous pieces is the Ballad of the Brown King. This is a Christmas cantata, and what we have is the very first draft. It was first done in the late 50s, and then as you look through, Margaret sent the libretto back. They performed it one time, and it went okay, but they both felt there needed to be more to it. What's wonderful is here's the original libretto. She writes a note to Langston saying, the numbering's wrong in that one you have. Here, I'm sending you the original, but you have to send it back. Clearly he did send it back because when you turn the page, you have all the markings that he's done to sort of correct it and expand it and add pieces. And then that was premiered in 1960, and it becomes one of their most famous works. There are also a couple of sad moments in the exhibit. There are 2 times when Margaret Bonds reached out to people in Washington, D.C. to have this piece performed in Washington. It was performed in New York, in LA, in Chicago. She really wanted to be played in the nation's capital. She reached out to Howard University and was told, well, we're going to do Carmina Burana instead.
Oh, man.
And she reached out to the White House, and Jacqueline Kennedy's secretary wrote back and said, thank you so much, it's very nice, we get so many things, sorry, I'm not going to perform it. So you also get those heartbreaking moments. And what's fascinating to me is she kept these rejection letters. These were rejections that meant something. There were a lot, any of us that are in arts, you get a lot of rejection letters, right? You can wallpaper the bathroom with a rejection letter. But what's interesting is these 2 she kept. These 2 hurt or stung. They symbolize something. And so those you'll see in the exhibit as well. I know we are, okay, I think I've got a little time. Take time when you can to read these letters, and you'll notice they wrote on everything, you know, they'd write letters. So she would go to an event, this was at Boston University, and I bring this up, it was the graduating recital of Charlotte Holloman. So she went, because she knew that Charlotte was going to sing some of her songs, and they were close friends, and she was so struck by the concert that she then wrote a letter to Langston, this is September 28, 1960, and let me see. So Langston, I think you'd be interested in, okay, now I can't read it. And the National Association of Negro Musicians have a ruling that every time a member appears on a program, they must use at least one composition written by a Negro. So she's writing him, she goes to this concert, she's thinking of this clearly in the concert, she said, oh, I gotta tell you this just happened in our association. And then she goes on to complain about it's unfortunate that the only people who have to do music by a Negro composer are Negro musicians. And she starts to worry about, is our music gonna be ghettoized? And so that's all this letter's about. She doesn't really talk about Charlotte Holloman's recital, but clearly this is what she was thinking about as she saw Charlotte Holloman perform. So you get that distinct, you get a sense of what she was thinking, what was important to her as she went through her life. And you see this also in things like this. A typed list, multiple pages of Negro artists that I have heard perform through the years. And then she writes, I have not listed the very well-known for obvious reasons. So she's just keeping track of anybody who's out there doing it, and it's page after page. And then she would go back with the hope of promoting these people more. It's not the famous ones, it's these are the ones I've heard that I need to help get their careers moving. I need to get the word out about them. She didn't want to lose sight of these folks. She also worked with some really famous people. So Leontine Price performed a number of her spirituals. And what's interesting is I didn't put this together until I saw this letter that she wrote to Leontine Price in 1955. Dear Leontine, recently Langston Hughes sent me a program which he had received from the Fisk University. Imagine how thrilled and surprised I was to find listed 4 of my spirituals. So Langston Hughes sort of played a role in linking these two women together. Then she goes on to explain, performances are very important to me these days. Some time ago, after the 3rd try, I was elected to membership in ASCAP, in what is termed non-participating membership. Just to give you a little history, and you'll see this in the letters, ASCAP will keep coming up. This is the Association of Composers and Performers. And for you to make money, if you write a song, for you to make money on the radio, you had to be a member of ASCAP, because every time your song was played on the radio, you would get royalties. But if you're not a full member of ASCAP, you didn't get money. And what's interesting is in the early letters from Langston, you'll see this when you go to the exhibit, Langston keeps going, Margaret, you gotta join ASCAP, you know, the Negro Speaks of Rivers, it's on the radio and you're not getting money, you need to join. And, you know, I wonder if she ever let him know she was trying to join. And it wasn't until much later, it wasn't until 1955, she finally, after her 4th attempt, got in there, and then she talks about that I know of 3 other colored women who are members. Florence Price, who has died, and the other 2 are not in the concert field, meaning they do popular music. This makes me feel a grave responsibility. So you know how happy I must feel to know that you are using my songs. So she's letting performers know you're helping, not just me, but you're helping us as African American women have a stake in serious music. She also was an activist, so you'll notice Montgomery Variations, and here we see it written in her own handwriting to Martin Luther King Jr. on her personal scores. She dedicated this to Martin Luther King Jr. And we have her program of what each movement meant and how inspired she was by what was happening in the civil rights. So she is writing music that is actively talking about the civil rights and what it means. And in some of her letters to Langston Hughes, you also see them working out concerts. So she'll write to him, okay, this is the latest concert I'm going to do, and this is the music, and these are the poems I would like in it, and the people speaking. And when you get a chance to see this, it's very easy to see in the exhibit, you'll notice he wrote her a letter, and he's saying, well, you know, but if it were up to me, I'd cut everything after part 10, down to the barest minimum. After an hour or so of lovely music, so much speaking is likely to be a bore. And later on, he goes on to say, you know, like, people are going to start putting on their coats and walking out. And then to make sure she got it, after he typed up this letter, he wrote it again in green all the way around the side. Like, I love you, but cut all that stuff. It's boring. I don't even like those hymns. So you get this, they could really sort of critique each other. You know, how are we going to effectively get our message across? If you have too many people talking, that's not going to work. Throughout her life, she kept traveling. She kept moving. This is a letter, if you want to call it that she sent to her husband and daughter in 1964 while she was on the road Saturday. It's from the Annapolis Hotel. So she's in Washington, D.C. I thought it was kind of fun to point that out. And she basically just says, okay, this is what I'm doing. On the 17th, on the 18th, I'm off on these 2 days. Then I'm in Alabama, Georgia. So she gives the whole list of where she's performing, what it's for. You know, so sometimes these are things like the Alabama State Teachers Union or Memorial Auditorium. And then when she gets to this, we get to the end. Oh, Larry and Jane, if you could be so kind, go find that dress that's in the corner of this and send it to this city because I need it for the next performance. Oh, and I love you a lot, bye. So this is kind of, I'm working, you know. If you don't hear from me, this is what I'm doing. And then they could also kind of keep track of where she was. So if they did need to contact her, they would know the address of where to send a letter or a note. Another very important piece that I would like you to keep an eye out, and again, this is one that was the first half of this cantata. It's called Signboard the Cross. It's another, this one's at Easter. Ballad of the Brown King was for Christmas. This is an Easter cantata. Both the Ballad of the Brown King, which is about the black king that came to visit Christ, and Signboard the Cross, Simon, also an African, who carried the cross for Christ as he was going to be crucified. So these are taking popular Christmas ideas. She often referred to it, Bach would write these cantatas. I'm doing a similar thing, but I'm thinking about the African American perspective and connection to these stories and to this history. This is our history too. And she then, this had believed to have been lost. At least the first 4 movements were believed to have been lost. We have the complete score here. So we'll hear the piano prelude today, and hopefully our choir in the next year or so will perform this in full. In fact, we've been scheming to do our universities together, have the choirs come together and do it together. But what's wonderful is when you see this, take a moment to read it, because she gives a history of the piece and why she thinks it's so significant. So, she decided in 1965 on the front score, I'm going to write what this is about and why it's important and how we got here. And then she says, after Mr. Hughes polishes the lyrics and I have rewritten Pontius Pilate's role, then we're going to get it published. Well, this is 1965. When Langston Hughes died in 1967, it was not published. As far as we know, it was never performed in full. He dies in 1967, and this is the program that she had from his funeral. This is one of the things she held on to. And what's interesting is shortly after the funeral, she started going through her music and marking the things that were significant, because there was talk about, and in fact this was done, of creating a Langston Hughes Memorial Library at Lincoln University. It is there, and collecting his works and having them there. And so you can see on some of the works that we have, and in some that also are not on display, she would write for the Langston Hughes Memorial Library, Margaret Bonds, and she would date it. These are all dated in 1971, 72. She also went through and marked when she first got ideas of works concerned with Langston Hughes. So here we see she's written in one of first sketches to Troubled Water, right there. So she went back through her sketches and went, that's important. That was one of the first times that this happened. And I end my conversation today because Troubled Water is the first piece we're going to hear on this afternoon's concert. So I hope you will join us. It's a very moving piece. It was inspired by the tune Wade in the Water. You'll hear an element of that tune, but even more importantly, it is a purely musical reflection of Langston Hughes' poem, Troubled Water, and she published it right after.